let's move on to another story, and a fairly interesting one, and that we've been tracking actually since 11th of July, and almost 2.5 months on. Nothing really seems to have moved in favor of those at the receiving end of what really transpired. Now, let's go back to this story. In its 50th Council meet on 11th of July this year, the GST Council gave what many called a body blow to the online gaming industry. It said that all online gaming, whether a game of skill or game of chance, will be charged GST at 28% on full face value. Let's imagine this. A game of poker that arguably requires at least some amount of skill will attract the same tax as, let's say, a game played in a casino that involves perhaps only chance. And full face value means that if a gaming platform receives 100 rupees from a gamer, 28 rupees straight up will go as GST. Now, for a gamer, if you're a gamer, and it's important for you, if you're a gamer, to gain even 1 rupee on your 100 rupees spent, your winning would actually have to be a full recovery of the 28 rupees of GST and then another 1 rupee of real winning, making it a total of 29 rupees. Now, this, as per gaming firms, has a very, very slim probability. Now, cut to the 51st GST Council meet. The Council further said that these rates will come into effect only on 1st of October 2023 and may not be enforced retrospectively. Now, if this 28% GST was a body blow, news emerging today is suggesting that 80 e-gaming firms are retrospectively being charged with GST evasion of up to 31,000 crore rupees. That seems like a death blow. Is it or is it not? Well, I'm not the expert here to answer this, but joining me to discuss this is Aarathi Ganesan. She's a journalist at Media Nama who's been following this story very closely. Aarathi, thank you so much for joining us here this evening on Business Plus. First up, do you think it is fair on account of the government, which had said that this is, number one, it said it's a clarification and it's not a rate change. And number two, it said in the 51st GST Council meet that these rates are not going to be applicable retrospectively. Is it fair on the industry for such a blow amounting to as high as 31,000 crore rupees today emerging out of nowhere?
I mean, a question of whether it's fair or not really depends on who you're talking to. The first thing I'd like to clarify over here is that this hike is for online skill games involving wagering. It's not necessarily on video games. It's not on games like Wordle or the crossword that you might play online every day. So there's a very specific category of games that this hike is sort of attacking in that sense. And there's a reason for that as well. If you kind of look at what's happened over the last few years, what you're seeing is the government and its various authorities increasingly arguing that it doesn't matter if you're playing a game of skill or not. What you're essentially still doing as a user is putting down money on an unknown outcome and then hoping for some reward in the future, no matter how skilled you are. That's the premise of many of these platforms.
Okay, yeah. So I think Finance Minister had come out openly, Aarathi, and said that, you know, as Ministry of Finance, as tax authorities, we are not concerned about skill or chance. All we are concerned about is tax. But my next question to you in the same light then is that, is it fair, even from a tax perspective, forget chance or skill for 1 minute, even if you look at the tax perspective, is it fair to charge a full face value GST, or should it just be the gross gaming revenue, which platforms refer to as the platform fee?
I mean, ideally, what's been happening till now is on gross gaming revenue. And in that sense, it could be termed as unfair for the gaming platforms because they've essentially been doing what they were doing based on the regulatory understanding at the time. And the government took its own time to actually come to this agreement a few months ago. So in that sense, yeah, it could be considered unfair, and you're looking at really existential numbers for the industry. The Gamekraft order, I think, was 21,000.
That's right, 21,000 crore.
Today, exactly, and today's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is 13,000, and I think some media outlets said that's the second highest that we have so far. So these are companies that did what they did based on the understanding at the time. The order, the decision comes later, and then they're kind of having to face the music. We're seeing reports of hundreds of people being laid off, which of course has its own consequences for the industry and just innovation as well. But coming back to my earlier point, I think as long as we're talking about these kinds of games, they do have certain addictive effects that have not been adequately explored, which do seem to appear like gambling effects as well. Like those could be just addiction, losing money, indiscriminately putting down money. And that's perhaps the reason the government took the step that it did. And it's something that state governments have also been arguing for a long time, that people are getting addicted to these platforms. They're dying by suicide because they're losing such huge quantums of money. And there's just simply not enough regulation around the area. And so that's perhaps one of the reasons that we're seeing what's happening today.
All right. So I think, for the sake of our viewers, Aarti, let's just run through the sequence of events and let's see, where it all started and how many hurdles have been crossed or created in thus far in the last 1 year. So I think you're referring to Gamekraft, and I think Gamekraft really got that first tax demand in September last year. It's been exactly 1 year. Let's look at the sequence of events. September last year, a 21,000 crore rupee tax demand was slapped on Gamekraft technology, and this notice incidentally was quashed by the Karnataka High Court. Now, cut to a little while later, you also had the GST network, actually the GST Council or the Ministry of Finance or the Revenue Department challenging this Karnataka High Court ruling, and that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court stayed the Karnataka High Court ruling and is now likely to set a precedent. So it said that the Karnataka High Court ruling will not be set as precedent, and a new ruling is expected to come out either end of this month or early next month. Now, today we see Delta Corp receiving a tax demand of about 11,139 crore rupees, and on account of that, of course, its share price also going down almost 19% or so in a single day's trade today. So Aarti, coming back to you, this has been the chain of events, this has been the sequence of events, and a lot of people who are part of the industry or industry associations fear that a tax wagering like this could actually see gamers who want to play online games, whether of skill or chance, who live in India, not hopping on to Indian gaming platforms, but international gaming platforms where their 100 rupees spent gives them full value of 100 rupees to play, and not 100 minus 28, which is 72 rupees.
Right, that is a real fear that the industry has brought up. The allegation is essentially that these are offshore platforms that operate outside of India in jurisdictions registered in the Caribbean islands and other places like that. And as someone on Twitter pointed out, any money that you're kind of pledging on those platforms isn't really going to be accounted for by India's tax net, so to speak. So it is a concern, and I think the biggest thing is just simply that they're outside the regulatory net, that you could have predatory platforms that hurt Indian users' interests, where you have people being preyed upon, people being sort of lured into false promises. And so that is a big concern that, with these kind of highly diminished returns, where you're essentially getting nothing back for what you're putting in, you're going to see a large scale migration to these offshore betting platforms. That being said, those platforms have been addressed to an extent by the online gaming rules, which also came earlier this year in April. And the Indian government has essentially said that no platform or intermediary in legal parlance can host games that haven't been verified under the rules. And platforms like this would fall under that, according to experts. So we could perhaps see some kind of limitation in terms of accessing, perhaps through blocking access to those websites. But the internet is a multi-headed beast, and people often find a way to access them anyway.
No, that's true, of course, and with the dark web and with VPN networks, etc., I don't think that's going to be a challenge at all. But Aarti, before I let you go, one final question to you. What it seems right now is that this 28% GST on face value across all e-gaming does not benefit the gamer, does not benefit the gaming firms, and only shores up more revenue, perhaps some would call unfair revenue, for the government. And if that is the kind of tax structure, GST structure, that the Indian government wants to impose on new age industries like gaming, is this going to further weaken, or do you think there's a contrary strengthen other investments coming into the gaming sector from international players?
So it will definitely hurt the real money gaming industry. It will definitely disincentivize it. And I think that's a fairly clear mandate from the government. I believe the statement from the finance minister is we can't be taxing these industries at the same rates as essential goods. So they do want to impose a cost to prevent social harms such as the ones I spoke of. What I do think, incidentally, this is also doing is hurting other gaming industries. We were speaking to representatives from the video games industry in India, which is also growing. And many of their global investors, after this hike was announced, remained concerned that, oh my God, are we investing in a project in India that's a gambling project? We thought we were investing in a video games project.
Right.
And that confusion is happening again because we're conflating all these different types under the e-gaming bracket and sort of sounding the death knell for the gaming industry when it's really just a specific subset. So I think unless we get that terminology clear, apart from the real money gaming industry, we may also see other gaming industries in India being hurt because of this association with gambling that's happened with the tax hike.
Absolutely, Aarti. Agree with you completely. And thank you so much for joining us here on Business Plus this evening. Have a lovely evening ahead.